The call came at 11:52 at night. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the clock on the microwave for the better part of an hour, not sure why I couldn't sleep, just knowing that the house felt wrong in some way I couldn't name. My son's name lit up the screen. I answered before the second ring. Dad. His voice came out strange, tight like he was holding something back. I sat up straighter. Everything okay? A long pause. Then I heard it, not crying exactly, more like the sound a person makes when they're trying very hard not to cry and losing the fight. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Another pause. I could hear movement in the background. Someone else's voice, low and distant. His wife, probably. There's a video, he said. It's everywhere. People from church are texting me. Meredith's mother just called. I set my coffee mug down, slowly on the end table. The television was on across the room with the volume barely above a whisper. Some late-night local broadcast, weather and traffic, and the kinds of stories that only make air when nothing else is happening. Son, I said, slow down. What video? He took a shaky breath. From the 4th of July festival. Dad, there are thousands of shares. I looked toward the window. The street outside was quiet. A neighbor's porch light flickered. I knew what he was going to say before he said it, because 6 hours earlier, my son had told me I wasn't welcome at his Independence Day celebration, and I had smiled and said I understood. And then I had gone and done the only thing I knew how to do when the night had nowhere else to put me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The way this story actually starts isn't with a phone call. It starts 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon, when I was in my garage, replacing the brake pads on my old F-150, and my son called to tell me, very gently, that this year's 4th of July was going to be different. I'd been living alone for going on 7 years by then. My wife, Patricia, passed in the spring of 2017 after a long illness that took everything from her slowly, and then took her all at once at the end. After that, the house in Tennessee, which had always felt a little too big, started feeling enormous, not haunted. Just wide open in a way that made every sound carry farther than it should. My son, Kevin, lived about 20 minutes away with his wife, Meredith, and their 2 kids, Brianna, who was 8, and little Sam, who had just turned 5, and had his grandfather's stubborn streak and his grandmother's laugh, which I will never stop being grateful for. For the past 3 years, the 4th of July had been our thing. Kevin and I would set up the big propane grill in his backyard. We'd do ribs and corn and whatever potato salad Meredith's mother dropped off. The kids would run through sprinklers until dark. Then we'd sit on the back porch and watch the fireworks from the Riverview Park explode over the tree line. It wasn't complicated. It was just good. So when my phone rang that Tuesday and I saw Kevin's name, I dried my hands on a shop rag and answered expecting nothing in particular. Hey, Dad. Hey. I leaned against the truck. What's up? So. He paused. One of those pauses that tells you immediately the conversation isn't casual. Meredith's brother is coming this year. For the 4th, that's fine, I said. I'd met her brother twice. Reasonable man, quiet, worked in insurance or finance, something with numbers. And her parents, and her aunt from Knoxville. Okay, Anne. He stopped again. I waited. Meredith and I have been talking. Her family hasn't really had a chance to all be together since the wedding. Her brother moved to Denver right after, and her aunt has had some health things, he exhaled. We want this to feel more like her family's holiday this year. You know? The garage felt very still. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started up. You want it to feel like her family's holiday, I repeated. We're not trying to exclude you, Dad. Meredith thinks it'll be easier for her family to relax and connect if it's not so. Mixed. I didn't say anything. I was looking at a coffee can on the shelf that Patricia had painted years ago. Some project from a crafting phase she went through, little sunflowers around the rim. I used it to hold loose bolts. Are you there? Kevin asked. Yeah, I said. I'm here. You're not mad. It wasn't quite a question. No, I said. I'm not mad. Which was partially true and partially not. I wasn't angry in the way people usually mean. I was something quieter and harder to explain. Something like standing at the edge of a room and realizing the door you thought led inside actually just led to another outside. We talked for another minute. Nothing that mattered. Then I told him I had to get back to the breaks, and we said goodbye, and I hung up and stood in the garage for a long time not doing anything. The coffee can with the sunflowers sat there. I looked at it. Then I picked up the socket wrench and went back to work. I'm a retired firefighter, 31 years with the Montgomery County Fire Department before I put in my papers. People always say things like, "That must have been so exciting," or "I don't know how you did it." And I never really know what to say back because it was just my job. You show up, you do what needs doing, you go home. There's no formula for the in-between parts. You just stay useful and try not to get anyone killed, including yourself. After Patricia died, staying useful was what kept me vertical. I started helping out with a local youth fire safety program through the department, teaching elementary school kids what to do if there's a fire in the house. I helped my neighbor, a widow named Frances, figure out why her gutters kept flooding every spring. I started driving for Meals on Wheels on Thursday mornings. Kevin used to joke that I was busier in retirement than I'd ever been working. I think he meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. But holidays were different. Holidays were the punctuation of the year, the moments when you notice the shape of things. And the shape of my life without Patricia and with Kevin 20 minutes away was bearable because of those punctuation marks. So being told not to come, however gently it was delivered, changed the shape of something. I just wasn't sure what yet. I spent the next 2 days behaving normally. Went to Meals on Wheels on Thursday. Helped Frances with her back door that had been sticking since the humidity came up. Watched a baseball game I didn't care about because it was something to do in the evening that wasn't sitting in silence. I didn't call Kevin. On the morning of the 4th, I woke up around 5:30, the way I always have. Old habits from shift work. I made coffee, sat on the back porch, watched 2 squirrels argue over territory in the oak tree. The sky went from gray to pale yellow to that particular washed-out blue that Tennessee's summers do in the early morning before the heat sets in. I thought about driving to Kevin's anyway. Not to crash the party. Just to drop something off, maybe. I'd been meaning to give him a toolbox that had been his grandfather's. A big red Craftsman chest that I'd been restoring quietly in the garage. New drawer pulls, touched up the paint, oiled every slide until they moved smooth as water. Kevin had admired it once years ago and then probably forgotten about it the way you forget things that seem permanent. But if I brought it today, it would look like something it wasn't. It would look like a guilt trip, or a bid for an invitation, or an old man trying to insert himself. So I didn't. Instead, I drove to the elementary school on Riverside, where the Youth Fire Safety Program was holding its summer session. We'd been running a 4-week workshop for kids who aged into it from the school reading program. I was supposed to be there anyway later in the week, but they always needed extra hands on holidays when the regular volunteers took time off. The program director, a woman named Gloria, who had the organizational precision of an air traffic controller and a laugh that could rattle windows, looked surprised to see me come through the door. "Frank," she said, "I thought you had family plans today." "Plans changed," I said. "What do you need?" She put me to work immediately, which I appreciated. I spent the morning running a rotation through fire escape planning with groups of 8-year-olds who were, to their credit, extremely serious about the subject. A girl named Jasmine asked me 3 follow-up questions about what to do if your designated meeting spot was too close to the house. I told her that was exactly the right thing to wonder, and that she should pick a neighbor's yard instead. She wrote it down in a notebook she'd brought from home. By afternoon, the festival was starting up on the main green downtown. The city did it every year. Booths and food trucks and a concert. Families everywhere with folding chairs and coolers. The fire department always had a presence there. The big engine parked near the entrance. A booth where kids could try on gear and take pictures. Captain Reyes, who I'd known for 25 years, spotted me heading that way and immediately drafted me to help staff the booth while 2 of his guys went to get lunch. "You retired people have all the free time," he said. "And yet somehow I'm always working," I told him. He laughed and handed me a plastic fire hat to give to a toddler who was staring at the engine like it was the most magnificent thing she'd ever seen. For a few hours, I forgot about being uninvited anywhere. I was just doing the thing I'd always done, showing up, staying useful. A retired firefighter at a holiday booth is not a remarkable sight. I didn't feel remarkable. I felt fine. Then the call came. Around 4 in the afternoon, a commotion started near the food vendors. Not panic, just that particular shift in crowd energy when something is wrong somewhere nearby. Someone near me said an elderly man had collapsed by the lemonade stand. I moved before I fully decided to move. 31 years will do that to you. He was on the ground when I got there, conscious but confused, pale in the face, sweating in a way that had nothing to do with the July heat. His wife was kneeling beside him, holding his hand, telling him to stay still, saying his name over and over. I knelt beside her. I'm a retired firefighter. Can I check on him? She looked at me with that particular gratitude that frightened people have, all of it directed at whoever shows up first. Please, she said. His name was Arthur. 74 years old, he told me, though speaking took effort. He'd had a stent put in 3 years ago. He'd been walking in the heat longer than he should have. His color was wrong. I kept him calm and talking while someone called 911. I loosened his collar, got him to sit rather than lie flat, flagged down a woman with a water bottle, asked his wife to keep him cool with one of the paper fans from the craft booth. I stayed with him until the paramedics arrived, then gave them the rundown. Vitals as best I could assess, his cardiac history, current presentation, and stepped back to let them work. The whole thing took maybe 12 minutes. His wife grabbed my hand before I could move away. She was a small woman, probably 70, with white hair pinned back and earrings shaped like American flags. She held my hand in both of hers and didn't say anything for a moment. He's going to be all right, she finally said, like she was telling herself as much as me. The paramedics are excellent, I told her. You did exactly the right thing by calling for help. A festival photographer had been working the crowd all afternoon. I didn't notice him until later. I barely noticed the small knot of onlookers who had gathered, or the city council member who happened to be nearby and came over to see what was happening. I was focused on Arthur, and then on making sure the crowd gave the paramedics room, and then on finding a shaded place to sit down because the heat was getting to me too. I had no idea anyone was filming. I drove home around 6. Kevin's celebration was probably in full swing somewhere across town. I thought about this for approximately 3 minutes, and then put on a Braves game and heated up leftover chicken, and ate on the porch while the light went golden, and then gone. I was almost asleep in my chair when the phone started going off. The first text was from a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then 3 in a row from people at church. Then a missed call from Gloria at the fire safety program. Then Kevin called. I've already told you how that started. What I haven't told you is what he said after he told me about the video. He was quiet for a long moment after I explained what had happened at the festival. Then he said, "Why didn't you call me?" "Call you to say what?" I asked. Another silence. "That you were." He stopped. "Dad, you spent the 4th alone." "I wasn't alone," I said. "I was at the festival. You know what I mean." I looked at the Braves game. They were losing, which seemed appropriate. "Son," I said, "you told me this was going to be Meredith's family's holiday. I respected that." The line went very quiet. "We could have figured something out," he said. His voice had changed, smaller, somehow. "Maybe," I said, "but we didn't." I heard him exhale. Then, in a different voice entirely, the voice he used when he was a teenager and had done something he couldn't talk his way out of, he said, "Dad, go enjoy your evening," I told him. "We'll talk." I hung up and sat there in the quiet. The video, as it turned out, was not what I expected. The festival photographer had caught the whole thing, start to finish. Me moving through the crowd. Me kneeling beside Arthur. Me giving the paramedics information. And then, this was the part I hadn't known about. One brief moment near the end when the city council member, a man named Garrett Holloway, who I vaguely knew from department fundraisers, had walked over and said something to me. He'd asked if I was with the fire department, and I'd said, "Retired, 7 years now." And he'd asked what I was doing there today, and I'd said the same thing I always say, just staying useful. That was the clip. 10 seconds. Me in a worn fishing shirt, sunburned, looking about every one of my 63 years, saying I was just staying useful. The caption someone had put on it when they shared it was, "This man spent his 4th of July alone after his family didn't invite him. Still showed up for a stranger." I didn't find out about that caption until the next morning, when Kevin showed up at my door at 8 a.m. with 2 coffees from the place on Riverside that I liked, and an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was about 17. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. He put the coffee in front of me without saying anything. Then he said, "I didn't know about the caption." "Neither did I said. "It's been shared 30-something thousand times." I wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "That seems like a lot." He looked at the table. Kevin is 41 years old. He's got his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, and a good heart that sometimes gets crowded out by wanting to keep everyone comfortable at the same time. "Meredith feels terrible," he said. "She shouldn't," I said. "She didn't post the video, Dad Kevin." I kept my voice even. I'm not going to pretend the conversation we had Tuesday didn't happen, but I'm also not going to make this into something it doesn't need to be. You made a decision about your holiday. I accepted it. Life went on. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I should have figured something out. Even if it was different. Even if it was just dinner separately the night before or something. "Yes," I said. "You probably should have." He flinched slightly. I hadn't softened it. I didn't think. He stopped. Tried again. I was trying to make Meredith's family comfortable. I didn't stop to think what I was actually doing. "You were choosing," I said. "That's okay. People get to choose. I just want you to know that I noticed." He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something else and didn't know how. We sat with that for a minute. Outside, a cardinal landed on the bird feeder Patricia had hung from the oak tree years ago. I kept filling it. Seemed like the right thing to do. "The photo album is on the kitchen counter," I said finally. Kevin looked up. "What?" "Patricia's photo album. The one Brianna asked about at Easter. The one with pictures from when you were little. I finally got it organized." I nodded toward the counter. "I was going to bring it to the 4th. Decided not to. But you can take it today." He stood up from the table and walked over. Picked up the album. Opened it. The first page was a picture of him at age 4. In a plastic fireman's helmet his mother had bought him at a dollar store. He was holding a garden hose and looking at the camera with the absolute seriousness of a child who has decided that being a firefighter is the most important job in the world. He stared at it for a long time. "She would have hated that this happened," he said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "She would have said some things I won't repeat." He almost laughed. Almost. He took the album home with him. We didn't hug goodbye, but we stood on the porch for a moment longer than necessary, and that was something. Over the next week, the video kept circulating. The local paper ran a short piece about Arthur's recovery. He was fine, as it turned out. Home in 3 days, mild cardiac event, caught early enough, and mentioned the retired firefighter who had intervened. That got picked up by a regional outlet. Then, the department's public information officer called to ask if they could share the story through their channels, and I said I'd rather they didn't. And they said they'd keep it brief, and I said fine. The strangest call came on a Friday from a woman named Sandra Chen who ran the Clarksville Volunteer Service Network. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at their fall recognition dinner. I said I wasn't much for speaking at dinners. She said she'd noticed, based on the profile the paper had run, that I'd apparently been volunteering with 4 separate organizations without ever being on any of their official recognition lists. "How is that possible?" she asked. "I never signed the forms," I said. A pause. "There aren't forms. There seemed like there were going to be forms." She laughed, which I hadn't expected. "Will you at least come to the dinner?" "You don't have to speak." I said I'd think about it. Kevin called every other day that week. Short calls, checking in, not pushing. I answered all of them. Meredith texted once. Just one line. "I'm sorry, Frank. I mean that." I wrote back. "I know you do." "Thank you." I didn't hear from her family, which was fine. They didn't owe me anything. What I noticed more than any of the calls or the video or the coverage was a shift in how Kevin talked to me. He stopped doing the thing he'd been doing for the past couple of years, the thing where he'd call and ask how I was doing in a way that sounded like a box he was checking. Now the calls were longer. He asked about the fire safety program. He asked about Francis next door. He asked about Arthur, which surprised me. I looked him up, Kevin said one evening. Arthur Beaumont. He's a retired school teacher. Taught fifth for 37 years. How'd you find that out? The paper ran a follow-up. His wife was quoted. I thought about the woman with the flag earrings. What did she say? She said a stranger knelt down in a crowd and talked to her husband like he mattered. Kevin was quiet for a second. She said it made her feel like the world was okay. I didn't say anything. Dad, Kevin said, I don't want to be the kind of person who forgets to make you feel like you matter. That landed somewhere. It took me a moment to process. You're not that person, I said. You had a lapse in judgment. A pretty significant one. Yes, I agreed. But I've watched you for 41 years. You generally get it right. He exhaled. I should have just said no to the whole separate families idea in the first place. That's a conversation you and Meredith need to have, I said. Not one I need to be part of. A silence then. You're not going to make this easy, are you? I love you, I said. That doesn't mean I'm going to pretend I wasn't hurt. The fall recognition dinner was in September. I went. Sandra had not been bluffing about the no forms thing. The whole operation was informal and warm, and smelled like the Brunswick stew someone had donated. I sat at a round table with a retired school nurse, who had been running a vision screening program out of her own pocket for 12 years, and a young man who organized neighborhood cleanup crews, and an older woman who delivered groceries to homebound veterans every Saturday. Good people. The room was full of them. Sandra said a few words about each honoree. When she got to me, she mentioned the festival incident, which I'd expected. Then she mentioned the fire safety program and Meals on Wheels, which I'd also expected. Then she mentioned that in 2019, I had quietly arranged for a family in my neighborhood whose house had sustained significant fire damage to stay in a furnished rental for 6 weeks while repairs were completed, paying the difference between what insurance covered and what the rental cost. I hadn't told anyone about that. Francis knew, because she'd helped me figure out the logistics. I wasn't sure how Sandra had found out. I found out later it was Gloria, who had heard about it from Francis, who apparently told people things I hadn't asked her to. Kevin was there. I had told him about the dinner with the expectation that he might want to come, and without asking him to. He brought Meredith. They sat 2 tables over. I noticed him during Sandra's remarks. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name from across the room. Afterward, he came and found me near the dessert table. The 2019 thing, he said. With the Garcias, Sandra should keep her sources confidential, I said. Dad. He shook his head slowly. Why didn't you ever tell me about that? I picked up a brownie, because it wasn't about telling. He stood there for a moment. Behind him, Meredith was talking to the retired school nurse, and the two of them were already deep in conversation, which seemed like a good sign. I want to do better, Kevin said. Not because of the video. Not because of the dinner. I just want to be the kind of son you deserve. I thought about that. Really thought about it. You already are, I said. Most of the time. This summer was a mistake. Don't make it a pattern. I won't. I know. He put his arm around my shoulders briefly, the way men do when they're not quite ready for a full embrace but want to cover the distance. I let him. Thanksgiving, he said. Everyone. No separate families. We'll see, I said. He looked at me. Is that a maybe? That's a we'll see. He almost smiled. That's better than a no. It is, I agreed. I drove home that night through neighborhoods I'd known for most of my adult life. The trees along Riverside had started to turn, the first faint yellows coming through the green. It was the kind of evening Patricia used to call good temperature weather. That narrow window in a Tennessee fall when it's neither hot nor cold and the air actually smells like something. On the kitchen counter, in the spot where the photo album had been, I had set the Craftsman toolbox. Still hadn't given it to Kevin. I decided to wait until the moment felt right, rather than the moment felt strategic. I made tea and sat at the table and thought about Arthur Beaumont, who had been a fifth-grade teacher for 37 years and had collapsed in the heat on the 4th of July while trying to enjoy a holiday with his wife. I thought about his wife with the flag earrings and the way she'd held my hand in both of hers. I thought about a 10-second video that turned into 30,000 shares and a recognition dinner and a conversation with my son that we should probably have had 2 years ago. Nothing about that sequence of events was something I'd planned. I hadn't gone to the festival to prove a point. I hadn't helped Arthur Beaumont because I wanted my son to feel guilty. I'd done it because someone needed help, and I had the skills to provide it, and that's always been reason enough. But the chain of events that followed was its own kind of lesson. Not about heroism, about visibility. For years, I'd been present in ways that people around me weren't fully seeing, partly because I didn't advertise, partly because the people closest to me had started looking in other directions. It takes a stranger holding a phone in a crowd sometimes to show your own family what they've been looking past. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's true, and because I spent too many years thinking that being useful in silence was the same as not needing to be seen. They're not the same thing. You can be humble and still deserve to have someone look at you and say, "I see you. You matter here. Don't go away." The photo of me with Arthur's wife, printed in the local paper, sat folded inside the front cover of the journal I've kept since Patricia died. Next to it, I tucked the program from the recognition dinner. Ordinary paper, nothing remarkable. But I keep the things that mark the moments when a story changes direction. Thanksgiving, as it turned out, was at my house. Kevin's idea. He called me in October and asked if I'd be willing, and I said yes before he finished the question. He brought Meredith's family too, which was not what I'd expected. Her parents were quieter than I'd imagined. Her brother, in from Denver, turned out to be a better conversationalist than his reputation. Her aunt knew more about Tennessee football than I did, which I found both irritating and delightful. We put 2 tables together in the dining room. Brianna made a centerpiece out of things she'd collected from the yard. Sam fell asleep on the couch at 7 o'clock and had to be carried to the car. At some point during dessert, Meredith's mother leaned over to me and said, "Kevin talks about you all the time?" "Good things, I hope," I said. "Always," she said. And she meant it in the way people mean things when they're not trying to be polite. I gave Kevin the toolbox that night, after everyone else had gone. He stood in the garage and opened every drawer, running his hands over the old Craftsman metal the way his grandfather used to. "I can't take this," he said. "It's already yours," I said. "Has been for years." I was just holding it. He looked up. His eyes were the same brown as his mother's, that particular shade that always seemed to know more than it was saying. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Some things repair slowly. Some things repair in one moment in a garage on a November night with an old toolbox between you and the person you raised. I can't tell you which kind this was. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe repair isn't even the right word for 2 people standing in the same place again and deciding without ceremony to stay. What I know is this. I stopped waiting for my presence to be acknowledged before I showed up. And somewhere in that, without planning it, I became the kind of person a community noticed and a son remembered to call. That's not a lesson I set out to learn. It's just what happened when I decided that staying useful was worth more than waiting to be invited.